What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Mills, back with Hometown Commander, back for another episode of $50 Upgrade, the show where I take a Precon and give you how I would spend $50 to upgrade that Precon. Today we're starting with the Bloomburrow Precons, and we're talking about the Squirreled Away Precon, headed up by Hazel of the Rootbloom, a 4-mana Golgari commander, Squirrel Druid 3/5 that says you can tap it, pay 2 life, and tap X untapped tokens you control to add X mana in any combination of colors. At the beginning of your end step, you create a token that's a copy of a token you control, and if it's a squirrel, you get 2 copies of it instead. Hazel is an interesting commander because it copies tokens and it taps tokens for mana, which are 2 really healthy abilities. But I think the problem with Hazel is not it, but what it's going to get compared to, and that's Chatterfang. Chatterfang is a very popular Golgari commander for both tokens and squirrels, and I think Hazel's going to have a tough time competing against Chatterfang. But I think if we can set that aside, if we can set the whole Chatterfang thing aside, although we'll happily play it in the 99, and try to focus on what Hazel's doing, I think we can have a ton of fun still making this a really good Squirrels deck that cares about the Aristocrat payoffs and have a good time. Well, we have our $50. What are we going to add? My goal here is to go through all the cards I'm adding, more or less one by one, tell you why I would add it, what's the reason, what are we trying to do with it. Then I'm going to show you all the cards I removed. I'm not going to talk about all of them one by one, but I'll kind of give you the highlights, and then we'll go through one playtest at the end of the deck with all the adds to it so we can kind of see what Hazel's trying to do. On the first page here, we have 2 pieces of removal being added, Abrupt Decay and Assassin's Trophy. To me, these are 2 of some of the best pieces of removal we have in our format. They're very inexpensive now because of all their reprints. Thank you, Wizards. And I think they're both key pieces. Abrupt Decay can just write any non-land permanent with mana value 3 or less. This hits Mana Rock, Soul Ring, the big pieces of artifact ramp underneath 3 mana that are going to be really important. And maybe if we have this early, we can use it early to take out those pesky things. On the other side, Assassin's Trophy just destroys any permanent opponent controls. And for the privilege, they get to go get a basic land and put it on the battlefield. Assassin's Trophy is so good because it can hit literally anything. And that's important for stopping certain things. Now, Assassin's Trophy might be slightly better if it exiled, but that's okay. We do have exile removal in the deck, and I don't remember if we're adding a piece or not. We'll see when we get there, but if not, I know there's things like Terra Sunder in the deck, so we do still have exile removal, but these are 2 of my favorite pieces of removal, especially in these colors, and I think they're well worth adding. Asian the Iron Throne is another Aristocrats piece we're adding to the deck. This is a background, so the ability is only active when our commander is out. It says whenever an artifact or creature you control is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, each opponent loses a life. If this is your first time looking at or understanding Aristocrats or what that deck means, this is what it means. Whenever our creatures die or whenever we sacrifice our creatures and have them die for our own benefit, we're hurting our opponents. And Age of the Iron Throne is a great one because not only is it creatures, but it's artifact 2s. So all of the food stuff that the forge mechanic from the main set that's also in here cares about is in here as well. Treasures are in here as well, but creatures as well. And so Age of Iron Throne kind of lives in both worlds, and in my opinion, it's one of the better Aristocrat payoffs we can throw in the deck. Grave Pact is one of those cards that is loved and hated, but I think it feels really great in this deck. Whenever a creature we control dies, each other player sacrifices a creature. This is a great ability because if people destroy our things or we sacrifice our own things, our opponents have to sacrifice in kind, and is going to keep us ahead on creatures, especially with how we're going to be making tokens. Marionette Apprentice comes in with Fabricate 1, so we can either make a servo or put a +1/+1 counter on it. And then whenever another creature or artifact you control is put from the graveyard to the battlefield, each opponent loses a life. Again, here's another one of these Age of the Iron Throne type abilities, but on a creature this time. And what I like about Marionette Apprentice is it comes in, we can make that servo, and that's a token that Hazel can make at the copy of our end step if need be. So again, you'll start to see when we talk about these Aristocrat abilities, we want to get as many of these as we can on the battlefield at once. And so what I'm trying to do is target the cheaper cards, meaning real life cost cards I can for Aristocrats, and slam them in to get real maximum value. Mirkwood Bats is kind of the best of both worlds. Whenever you create or sacrifice a token, each opponent loses a life. Mirkwood is great at what it does because we're getting them on the front end when we're making the tokens, and we're getting that life loss on the back end when we sacrifice them. I love Mirkwood Bats. It's probably one of my favorite cards in Lord of the Rings, and it's a slam dunk here. Pest Infestation is probably one of my favorite token creating sorceries that exist in the game for 2 reasons. One, You destroy up to X target artifacts for enchantments, which is an upside, obviously. Get rid of people's soarings, get rid of people's artifacts if they have pesky enchantments that you want to get rid of, protections, buffs, whatever may have you. Even just 1 or 2 men into each of the X can get rid of a few pesky things, but the important part comes in the next sentence, which is you then create twice X 1/1 black and green pest creature tokens with when this creature dies, you gain a life. I think what makes Infestation so good is you do not have to destroy any artifacts or enchantments to get twice X pests. You can literally just get the pests, which is important on a turn where you have a ton of mana and nothing to do, but it's even better when you can destroy things at the same time. And what I like so much about the pests specifically are they have the ability when it dies you gain a life. This means that when you pair that pest with a lot of the popular aristocrat effects, you're going to have your opponents lose 1 and you're going to gain 2, 1 from that ability probably and 1 from the pest, meaning that exchange becomes really good for you. Pitiless Plunder feels right in a deck like this, especially because it combos so well with Chatterfang, who is in the 99. Whenever another creature you control dies, make a treasure. This is great because then we're already sacrificing our creature tokens for something. Now we're getting treasures, which means mana on the back end. One of my favorite cards for this deck, because it kind of plays a multi-role, is Sandstorm Salvager. Its regular ability when it ETBs just creates a 3/3 golem artifact creature token. This is great because then that's a great target for Hazel if we don't have a squirrel token to just make more golems. Now we have potentially have a bigger board of 3/3 golems. But Salvager gets even better with its bottom ability. We can pay 2 mana and tap it to put a +1/+1 counter on each creature token we control, and they all gain trample on a turn. This is a way, potentially, to work towards ending the game, making our creatures bigger and bigger, and they get trample, which means they could potentially hit hard, depending on what route you want to go. I will tell you, as you put more money into a deck like this and as you get more effects that make your creatures bigger and bigger, trample is the thing that's going to help you end the game, right, when it comes to creature tokens hitting for damage. And so the bigger they are, the better that trample becomes. Valley Rock Caller from the main set makes a ton of sense. Whenever it attacks, each opponent loses X and we gain X, where X is the number of squirrels, bats, lizards, or rats we control. Again, here we care about squirrels more than anything else, but hey, we will take it. Once you see this thing deal 10, 11 life to each opponent and you gain 11, you're going to understand why this ability can be very good. It has Menace, so it's going to be a little bit harder to block for some players. But of course, the later the game goes, that's not the case. But I don't mind sacrificing this Rock Collar in combat to get 10, 11, 12 damage to my opponents all at the same time, especially when we're pairing this with all these other aristocrat payoffs. Warren Soul Trader is a new sacrifice outlet for Modern Horizons 3 and a great one at it. You pay a life to sack another creature to make a treasure token. What I think makes Soul Trader so good is, one, you get mana back for sacrificing a creature, and a life isn't that big of a deal, especially when we have all these other aristocratic style effects that are getting us life back. But what's really good about Soul Trader is this is kind of another copy of Pitiless Plunderer when it comes to comboing with Chatterfang. That's a topic for another day. Chatterfang is its own world, and it's something you'll realize very quickly in the deck that's very good. But Soul Trader does actually combo with Chatterfang as well. And if you want to move Chatterfang to the command zone of this deck instead of Hazel, this is a card as well with Pitiless Plunder that I would very highly recommend putting in because they both combo very well. And then Yigra, Eater of All, a 5-mana elemental cat that says all other creatures are foods in addition to their other types, meaning they're artifacts, and you can pay 2 and tap and sack them to gain 3 life. And then whenever a food is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, you put 2 counters on Yigra. Why making them foods is so important is we do have a bunch of squirrels in the new set that use the forage mechanic. For that mechanic, you either have to exile 3 cards from your graveyard or sack a food. So now all your creatures become foods, and hey, now you can use them for the forage abilities. But this also means that if you have any abilities that you want to put in your deck that care about the food tokens, there are plenty of them in the history of Magic, especially with more recent sets like Lord of the Rings, now you can put those in. This turns on Agent the Iron Throne because now we have artifacts and now we have creatures dying. But there are other abilities that care about when artifacts go to the graveyard. Now you turn those on as well. I mean, I haven't put in too many of those, but I think you can start to see that now you're opening up more possibilities of what you can do now when you start having cards that have multiple types to them that mean something. And I think you can take and run with this if you want to put more of the forge stuff in the main set in and really take advantage of all your creatures being foods. But let's get to the stuff we're going to remove. I don't know why that messed up on that slide. But let's talk about the ones we want to remove. At the end of the day, I took my picks at what I wanted to remove, and I think that some people are going to inevitably look at this list and go, why are you taking X card out? And that's fair. You probably have some sort of call to that card, and I would say keep it in, pick something else to take out. My goal here was trying to get more synergy into the deck and maybe lose cards that are probably objectively good on their own, but I think that other cards are better fits specifically rather than the card that you got. I'll give you an example. Arrest of the Endless Web is a good card. Whenever opponent casts instant sorcery, you make a 1/2 spider. On the surface, this is great, right? You're getting tokens. This works with Valley Rock Hollow, right? Because the spiders are a part of that. Okay, sure, I agree it's a good card, but I'd much rather take this out for something that makes me more tokens at once, especially when I have abilities that care about that and have more things that I can sacrifice. Or other creatures that are squirrels or just fit our synergy. I like Arasta a lot, but I'd rather pick something else that's more synergistic rather than something that can make me tokens, because there's a bunch of things that can make tokens. Same thing with Chittering Witch. I think on its value, it's a good card. It comes in, makes a rat equal to the number of opponents you have, and you can sack a creature to give something -2/-2. It's a great ability, and it fits really well with the rest of the deck because I can sack creatures to give things -2/-2. But my worry with this deck specifically is I spun it towards aristocrats. In order to do that, I had to bring some aristocrat support in, whereas I don't think this deck is naturally trying to be that, even though I think it's what it's supposed to do. That's just the nature of it being a precon. Unfortunately, at the end of the day, pre-constructed decks are very random and scattershot. And I think sometimes in order to kind of rein them in and push them towards an objective, you have to kind of lose some cards that are still going to be good for the sake of getting that ability to get the things you want. Took Decree Pain out. It's a board wipe. It's a great board wipe, don't get me wrong. And when you cycle it, it can be a little mini board wipe as well. But I decided to focus a teeny bit more for that slot on the single target removal because I thought the deck needed just a couple more pieces of single target removal. I love Golgari Signet, but in this green deck, I'd much rather pull towards ramp if possible, whether it be land ramp like Rampant Growth and things like that, or using other things that can sacrifice creatures to make mana. That's probably the way I'd want to go with Golgari Signet. But if you're worried about mana or you start to notice the deck needs more of it, bring the Signet back in. I think it's great at what it does. Nested Shambler on its face is a great card. Whenever it dies, you make X tapped 1/1 green squirrels, where X is its power. Believe me, it's a great ability. I'm just not entirely sure how to make its power big enough to make it worth it in the current build that we have, and so that's why I took that one down. Ogre Slumlord probably makes sense on its surface. Whenever another non-token creature dies, you make a rat, and all rats have Death Touch. I like it, but again, take it out for more specific feelings and more specific cards for the strategy that we're trying to push towards. Same thing with something like Skyfish Spider. When it comes in, you may sack another creature. If you do, destroy target non-land permanent. And when it dies, you may gain a life for each creature card in your graveyard. And if you do, you exile it. Again, I get it. It's removal, right? It comes in, sacks creature for removal. But we have better things that can remove for it. And again, I would just rather put in a more synergistic piece. The Terramorphic Expanse might seem odd to someone why I would choose to pull a land like this out. But the truth is, I think the Precon just has one or two too many lands, in my opinion, and I thought it would be easier to pull out something like Terramorphic Expanse than a dual land that I think is actually worth having. There are going to be those people who say, why would you take out a land that fetches even if it comes in tapped? Okay, sure. Pull this back in, take out another land of your choice. But to me, I'm not playing enough sacrifice anything effects in the deck to make Terramorphic Expanse be important. If we were playing more whenever you sacrifice all permanent in general, then I think Terramorphic Expanse is more than worth it having as a counterpart to things like Evolving Wilds and bringing in things like Fabled Passage and things like that. The deck just doesn't support it, and in a $50 upgrade, I don't have the money to bring in those things, and so for that reason, it's probably worth just taking out. And then Windgrace's Judgment, I love it. It's a great card, 5 mana to nuke, 1 non-land permanent for each number of opponents you have. I like it. It's a great card, but I'd rather to focus on better single target cheaper removal rather than this type of removal. And if you're not okay with that, that's fine. Put it back in. But for me, I prefer having the right removal at the right time for things rather than having this general removal. We are playing things like Casualties of War and stuff like that. It's not like we're getting rid of our only one thing per person ability at all by any means. I just chose to take this out to make more room for other things. Well, let's get into one little playtest here with our $50 of upgrades added. So this is just the Precon plus the cards we added in. Keeping a 4-lander with an Idol of Oblivion, being able to draw us cards and make tokens. Gourmand's Talent, which is the new class for this deck. And then Hazel's Brewmaster. Whenever it enters or attacks, exile up to 1 target card from a graveyard and make a food. And foods have all activated abilities of all creature cards exiled with Hazel's Brewmaster. So a really interesting ability and something we can definitely take advantage of for sure. Well, turn 1, we draw a Gilded Goose, and we will happily take it. When it comes in, we're going to make a food. We can tap it and sack a food to make a mana of any color, which is a great ability. And as we stack up more food, we'll get to really take advantage of it. We'll get that bogged down. I see the argument for the idol this turn or the Gourmand's Talents. During your turn, artifacts you control are foods in addition to other types. That's level 1. We have to pay 3 mana to get up to level 2, which is whenever we gain life for the first time each turn, make a raccoon. Then at level 3, when you gain life for the first time each turn, put a +1/+1 counter on all creatures you control. I mean, I'm sure there's a valley of arguments here. I think for me, Idol of Oblivion probably makes more sense so that when we start getting Hazel down, we can start drawing more cards immediately. I like the Gourmand's Talent. I think it's a good ability. I just don't think we're there taking real advantage of it yet, and I don't want to use the food yet for the goose. Turn 3, I think we're in a very similar position. I mean, I can sack the food to play something like Hazel, but then we won't have a token left around to copy. So I think I would just get the talent down. Again, all of our artifacts turn into foods, which isn't a bad thing. But again, I have no way to make a token. Well, no, I do. Right, I apologize. I'm going to pay 2 into tapping the goose to make a food, right? And then I can draw from the Oblivion. And then now we've got another one. Now we could sacrifice 1 for goose, right, to use it for mana and still have 1 to copy with Hazel. Play the Swamp for turn 2nd Harvest so we can copy all tokens we control. Great ability. Squirrel Nest, put it on a land, and that land can start making squirrel tokens. I like it. I think I just want to get Hazel down here and get it started. So we can tap X, untap tokens we control to make mana, or we can tap the food. So that's great there. And then at the beginning of our end step, we create a token that's a copy of another token we control. At this point, we're just going to pick the foods until we can make some squirrel tokens with other abilities. But I would just go to end step, make a food, tap the Oblivion to draw. And we'll move into our next turn, turn 5. So turn 5, we have a Mirkwood Bats now. Great ability. As soon as we can start making more tokens, Mirkwood's going to get really good. And then we have Saw in Half, a way to take a creature and turn it into 2 creatures. I think this turn probably has a couple ways we could take it. I like Pitiless Plunderer to start getting treasures in the future. Mirkwood Bats would make sense to start dealing some damage to our opponents. I'm trying to think, is there a world where we could Mirkwood Bats? I think there's a world where we can use these 4 lands for Mirkwood Bats, tap Hazel and pay 2 in these 3 to put a Squirrel's Nest on this forest, and then tap it to make a squirrel. That would make 1 damage for everybody with Mirkwood Bats. Then we can draw off the Oblivion. But my thought process here is now we make 2 squirrels on the end step with Hazel, 2 more damage to everybody with Mirkwood Bats. And now we've kind of got our strategy starting. We're kind of getting this mapped up, getting it ready to go. We'll go into turn 6, Exotic Orchard for turn. We could Second Harvest. That would deal 6 damage each to our opponents because we're just doubling up on the tokens. But I'd love to find a world where we could make as many tokens as we can at once with Second Harvest. Let me think. It'd be fun to like saw in half Mirkwood Bats, to have 2 of them, right? And then it'd be doing 2 damage, right, every time. Let's think about this. So if I saw in half of that, I get 2 copies of them. They're both 2/2s. It'd be 2 damage every time. I would have enough mana to Second Harvest. That would be 6 tokens times 2 would be 12 damage each opponent. Man, that's not bad at all. And then on end step, we would make 2 more squirrels, doing 4 more. So it'd be a total of 16 damage this turn on turn 6. That doesn't feel bad at all by any means. Let's do that. I'm going to saw in half Mirkwood Bat. So it says, destroy target creature. If that creature dies this way, its controller creates 2 tokens that are a copy of it. So let's do that. I'm going to saw in half it to make 2 copies of it. Whenever you create... I don't think they're going to see themselves coming in. And then they're both... 2 2s, I think, instead of 2 3s, but that's okay. I would tap this to make the squirrel. That's 2 damage to each opponent. Then let's see. 1, 2, 3, and 3, 6. You know, tap 3 and then tap Hazel and a couple of our foods to play second harvest. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tokens. That's 14, right? 14 damage to each of our opponents. So now we're at 21 in a turn. Take an attack if we want to, but honestly, we just go to end step, make 2 more, right? And now, what did I say where we're at? 14 and 4 is 18. 20, 22. I mean, we're at 22, 24 damage this turn. I mean, now our opponents have lost more than half their life. We're on turn 6, and all we need to do next turn is either find a way to get in with these squirrels, or sacrifice them, or we can draw there off the Oblivion. I think we're in a great space now because we can tap them all for mana if need be, and we can just find some way to either make more, or we just need to find something in the deck to turn them in. We can always sack the Oblivion now to make it 10-10 Eldrazi. I mean, I like the spot we're in because at minimum we're going to be hitting everybody for at least 2 to 4 damage a turn with the Squirrel Nest and the Hazel. And I think this is kind of exactly one way that we want that to end out. All we need is a big buff or some way to buff our creatures, and that game would have turned out really great. But let me know, what do you think of my $50 upgrade for Squirreled Away down in the comment section below? I'd love to hear what you think of it. What cards are you adding? What cards are you removing? I'd love to conversate you down in the comment section below, and I will catch you guys next time.